Let's talk draft now, Logan. We've got a bunch of sort of rapid fire questions that we're going to cover today just to preview the class overall. We did our mock on Wednesday. You guys can go watch that. We picked for every lottery team as we would if we were GMs. And we were not worried about the consensus in that process. This was about our personal opinions. So with that being said, Logan, who is the player you are highest on versus the consensus in this class?
I've talked about this gentleman a lot. If you've been tuned into Nerd Sesh for some time now, it's definitely Isaiah Collier, point guard out of USC. I've seen Collier get mocked mid-teens, the late 20s in a lot of mocks. I think Collier grades as a top 10 guy for me. I think he has the potential to be the best point guard in this draft class. I love the makeup of what Collier does. He's a strong, stout point guard. I love his process out of the pick and roll. I love how he uses his physicality on drives against everybody. I think he's got the makeup to be a really good two-way player. He's got great hustle and energy, even as like a help side kind of guy on drives. I think Collier has the potential to be a really good defender, but I like his makeup as a potential lead ball handler, man. I like his touch. He's got a decent floater game, and I've loved the flashes of the off-the-dribble shooting that we've seen from him. He's got a ways to go there in terms of consistency, but he's had games where he's knocking down shots from really deep from behind the arc, where he's hitting these off-the-dribble kind of moves, and he's very, very young. I think a lot of people are sleeping on him, man. I really like Collier, but the biggest thing to me that is going to translate in the league is how strong he is. I just love how physical of a driver he is. I think that's going to translate really well to the league. And go back and watch some tape on him, man. Like he's good at finishing, against like really bigger guys who are a lot bigger than him, man. I don't think that's going to be a problem at the next level. So yeah, I would take him, and we didn't take him in the mock, and that's not an issue of talent for me. It's an issue of fit. I want Collier to go someplace where he can actually get burn and get minutes immediately. I don't want him to get drafted and go to a team where he's going to be buried on the bench for a couple of years. I want the guy to get immediate experience and play. So him not going in our mock draft was not an issue of my evaluation of his talent. It's more of a stylistical fit. But for me, it's Collier. I love the makeup of his game.
I'm not quite as high on Collier as you are. I would not have him as a top 10 guy, for example. And I think really the key for him in a number of categories is just going to be consistency. For those who don't know, this is Isaiah Collier from USC. He was a super, super highly regarded high school prospect, top 3 guy in the class. It's going to be about the consistency of the shot. It's going to be about the consistency of his decision making, which could be pretty reckless at times. And I'm just not as sure that I'm as high on like some of the ceiling stuff with him. Like I don't really see that A trait for Isaiah Collier. I absolutely think the strength, but when I look at the overall athleticism in terms of verticality, like I think that he's a solid athlete defensively. I like how he competes. I think his frame is good there, but he's like 6'2.5" with a 6'5" wingspan. Like he's not a really big guard. So just doesn't have a standout enough trait for me to sell him as a top 10 prospect when there's also some concerns, some question marks in his game. So for me, a guy who's very much on the flip side of that, another Pac-12 guy, is Tristan da Silva out of Colorado. 23 years old, as pro-ready as anybody in this class, just is in the exact archetype of the sort of player that any contender should be looking to pick up in the mid-first if you can. OKC, we were just talking about at 12, you want a big forward who can rebound, who can play make, who can shoot, who can put the ball on the floor, who can defend multiple positions. Tristan da Silva is a really good option there, especially if it's like you get him and then you add an Avdia and then you add a Larry Markkinen. Then I think that their front court would be looking amazing. I'm just incredibly confident in him being a good basketball player. The other guy who has definitely more of a range of outcomes is Nikola Topic, who has been falling recently in this draft process and has gone from a guy who was viewed as a sort of top 5 prospect to now maybe falling out of the lottery entirely because he tore his ACL. That seems to be sort of the prevailing concern. But I think there's a strong case that he's the best offensive player in this class. He is a really effective driver, very shifty, great change in pace, really good below the rim finisher, great touch around the rim. He's the best passer in this class, 6'7", bunch of angles there, really dynamic, creative passer, like awesome feel with the roller. super efficient creator out of both pick and roll and isolation. The concern with him offensively is just what is he as an off the dribble shooter? What is he in terms of his floater touch, his intermediate game, because he hasn't been great there. But I think that his touch, I mean, he's an amazing free throw shooter, like 87% there, makes me relatively confident in that shot projecting. And if it does, I think he's one of very few guys in this class with a sort of star ceiling offensively. And defensively, I think he's always going to have issues. He's just not a particularly good athlete. Logan, you said last show that he was listed with a 7-foot wingspan. Just want to clear up because that's what his camp had been pushing for a long time. It's actually not the case. It was measured at like 6'6". Why were they lying by so much? I don't know. Pretty silly. It didn't look like a 7-foot wingspan on tape. It wasn't helping him defensively, clearly, and you knew that it was going to get measured at some point. But I do worry about him defensively, but I just think, again, if he's maybe the best offensive player in this class and he's going 15, and I think because of his size, he at least won't be like relentlessly targeted defensively. I really like the guy, and in a vacuum, I would definitely take him in the top 10. On the flip side of this, Logan, who is the player who you are lowest on versus the consensus in this class?
Projected number 1 overall pick in some mocks, Zaccharie Risacher is probably the guy I'm lowest on, and not by much. You know, I think Risacher is a lottery guy to fringe top 10. We took him 7th in the mock. I think that's about right for Risacher. I just don't understand the number 1 pick hype. There's a lot of concerns for me in terms of just how well-rounded he's going to be. One, my primary concern is if this is a guy that you're going to put the ball in his hands a lot, doesn't create a lot of downhill pressure, right? Isn't the greatest ball handler or passer. You know, his one standout trait is that he shoots really well. So, you know, great. That's a really valuable skill to have. But what else does he do for you offensively is what I question. You know, he shot 44% of his looks from behind the arc. Overwhelmingly, his shot palette is just threes. And then defensively, I worry about him. He is slight of frame. He's not the greatest athlete. Yeah, I just worry about how he impacts the game really outside of his shooting. You know, I'd much rather take a guy who has a better athletic profile, who can create more downhill pressure, you know, who's maybe shot as a project but does a lot of other great things. I trust his shot. I really do, and I think he brings that immediately. But I worry about Risacher in all the other areas other than his shot. And again, this isn't a criticism of him as a prospect. It's just I don't really understand where the number 1 pick hype is coming from.
Obviously, this is a weak class, and so you look at it differently. It's especially weak in terms of the top, but I do think there's a much clear-cut path to stardom for like an Alex Sarr, even though he has his offensive limitations, because if you're a dominant defensive big and then you do enough things offensively, good finisher off the roll, he's shown flashes of floor spacing, flashes of connective passing. There's just a much clearer path there. If you're just a straight up 3-and-D wing, you can be a really good NBA player, but there's really no path to stardom when you have the sort of limitations as an off the dribble creator and finisher around the rim that Risacher does, in my opinion. So he would definitely be on my short list here as well. And not to be anti-French, because I'm not. I'm going to learn French, you guys. Okay, I've got Spanish and Italian in my bag. French is up next. My father's name is Pierre, so don't accuse me of any sort of anti-French bias, because I can see all you guys. I can see your heads working already. It might be Tidjane Salon, who has just like been shooting up draft boards, and I was with the initial rise. Like, this guy is one of the most special athletes in this class. I think he has the potential to be one of the best defenders in this class, absolutely, and I think he's very good at weaponizing his athleticism, super high motor, really good cutter. His three-point shot has improved. Like, I really like that sort of profile for Salon and what he can grow into. But now I'm seeing him as like a top 6, top 8 guy on a lot of people's boards and a lot of people's mocks. And I would probably be more inclined to take him somewhere in that 10 to 14 range. I definitely see the ceiling, and it's a higher ceiling than you get with some of these guys who maybe I would take in the top 10. But in this class, I am leaning more on whose floor am I confident in? Who do I think can really be a contributor to winning, especially because so many teams, Logan, are just closer than they've ever been. Like, so many teams have a building block or two, and those winning players, if you're confident you're going to land one, are really, really valuable. And I just think it's a couple years before Salon is doing anything meaningful in the league. So I just think the questions about creation off the dribble are very real. The handle is not polished, and the three-point shot is still a question mark. So this is what I said last time. The spectrum for a guy like this is sort of like the Sekou Naboya to Giannis spectrum. And I can see the intrigue of the upside. I can also see the concerns with the downside. And that makes me maybe a little less high on him than some of these people who he's rocketed up the board are. Okay, Logan. Who is your favorite sleeper talent in this draft? And by sleeper, we're not talking like deep second round, just because we've mostly been focused on lottery. We're talking late first, early second round kind of guys who you just love.
Oh, no, I actually did write 2 late second round guys down.
Go for it.
These guys, I'm really surprised that they're not mocked. I've seen so many spots not mocked to get taken until either like late second round in the 50s or undrafted completely. One of these guys that I've seen that has been undrafted in a lot of mocks is Quentin Post out of Boston College. Now, I understand a little bit why he's not getting mocked. He's 24 years old. He's one of the oldest prospects in this class. But you talk about drafting guys with really high floors, and I think this guy can play immediately. He's a really big center, not really big center, but he's a big guy, 7 foot, 244 pounds, 7 foot 2.5 wingspan. He's just really skilled for a guy this size. Like, he shot 43% on 3 threes a game. He's a guy who can attack closeouts. He can really put the rock on the floor. And I love his touch, man. He's got a floater game. He's got post hooks. He's got post fades. He's got great touch on layups. Now, on the flip side, like, he's a limited athlete, and I question maybe his defensive ceiling. But he racked up nearly 2 blocks per game. Boston College was 22 points worse per 100 possessions with him off the floor than on. Like, he's just a really skilled stretch 5. And I think in the modern NBA, you know, this is just a really rare archetype that you wouldn't see 10 years ago, that you wouldn't see 20 years ago. Now, as it is with all of these kind of limited athletes, you know, skilled guys, where does he fall on the like Frank Kaminsky to, you know, Luke Cornett spectrum? Like, where does he fall on that?
That's the whole spectrum?
No. These are the guys on the low end. These are guys on the low end.
I was going to say, bro, I'll just pass.
What's the high end, man? Like Brad Miller? What's the high end of the
Anderson.
skilled? Oh, my gosh.
Cal Bear, Ryan Anderson.
Dude.
No, what are you talking about? There's a bunch of skilled stretch bigs. Well, I don't know. Are you just talking offensively?
I put on the high end as like a Nikola Vucevic, right? That's the kind of high end, like, stretch 5, I guess, like limited athlete. But I say limited athlete, I still don't think he's going to be like a negative. I think the guy can legitimately protect the rim. I think he's a good defender. He's not like a complete bum there. I think he can actually do it, and he's really experienced. But just how skilled he is. Like, I think this guy has legitimate touch. I think he can attack closeouts. I think he's deceptive. He's got a great pump fake in getting into the lane. He's just too damn big and too damn skilled for me to not see this guy, like, at least getting a crack at the league. And it really surprises me that he's not getting mocked to get drafted. I think he's really skilled. And then the other guy I want to give a shout to is Antonio Reeves out of Kentucky. Same kind of thing as Quentin Post. He's an older guy in this class. He's 23 years old, but Reeves has had a lot of experience. He's 6'5", 190 pounds, 6'8" wingspan. And he's a Kentucky guard, man. He reminds me a lot of Emmanuel Quickley in some ways.
Kentucky guards. Good
shooter. I think you can run actions for him if it's spot up, curling around screens. Great at attacking closeouts. He's a really good pull-up shooter. Great floater game. Good at running in transition. I think you're looking at a really skilled bench scorer. And maybe that's not the most intriguing thing to teams, but again, in a draft like this, I want guys who can just play. And I think Antonio Reeves can step into the league immediately, and I think he can play and give you a solid 20 minutes a night. Again, I don't think you're looking at superstars in either of these guys, but I think they can both ball, and they're really, really skilled talents. Again, I don't know if it's the age thing, but I think these two guys are much too skilled to not get drafted.
So I am looking at a different range for this question. Now, you are talking about truer sleepers. Good for you. I'm just talking about guys who I really like in that late first, early second range. First one, Logan, I'm so thrilled that I get to shout out a California Golden Bear and truly believe it. I love Jalen Tyson, man. Transfer from Texas Tech, who just absolutely popped this past year. to me, one of the most versatile players in this class, and the sort of wing who I am just incredibly confident in succeeding because of that. A lot of that versatility is on the offensive end. Like, this is a guy who is very effective with the ball in his hands. He was super efficient as a pick and roll creator, 77th percentile, 71st percentile isolation creator, and that is a combination of scoring skill and his passing ability. Like, he is pretty athletic and really strong downhill driver, and he's shifty. He's a little bit tough to stay in front of as well. But then he also has pretty legit passing touch and anticipation. He can see various angles at his height. He also has quite a nice post game, 74th percentile post up player. And he's got, again, the physicality, solid touch on turnarounds, and he can pass out of all of these actions. But then it's a lot of the complementary stuff that he does as well. He's an excellent cutter. He is a willing screener at his size. Super valuable in the league to be able to do this many things. He's a solid three-point shooter. I think you want to see him more consistent there, but 36% from deep, 80% from the line. Like, he's pretty much good at everything offensively. Not necessarily great at anything, but good at everything. And then he's an elite positional rebounder, averaged like 7 boards a game, and a really versatile defender. So the production was outstanding. He gave you 27 and 3.5 on 56% true shooting. And because he has so many positive traits, so many things that he has at least slightly above average at, I think there's clearly a role for him at the next level, kind of regardless of where you put him. The other guy, also a very productive college player who just has a lot of traits that I think translates. Another guy who is really good at a number of things, that's Kyle Filipowski, who college basketball fans will be much more familiar with because he's one of the best players in the country at Duke. I really love this guy's offensive versatility as well. Here we're talking about a big, but a big who has like some wing traits, like really comfortable handling, really comfortable putting the ball on the floor. Small sample size, but he averaged 1.2 points per off the dribble jumper this year. Now, his jump shot is something of a question because he's like 32% from deep over 2 seasons and about 72% from the line. But I like his shot. I'm confident in him being at least an average 3-point shooter. And then you have this guy who has good touch as a finisher. It's sort of inconsistent with him in terms of how much he embraces the physicality down there, but I wouldn't say that he's consistently overwhelmed, and then has a really nice polished post game. He's got turnarounds, he's got spins, he's got hooks. He can just do everything that you want from a big or even a wing. He can post up, he can roll, he can isolate and attack mismatches there, he can spot up. He's a good cutter. Like, he was above average efficiency through every single one of those play types that I just mentioned. And then he does a lot of connective stuff as a passer. He's very capable there. He even ran just 8 pick and rolls, but he averaged 1.25 points per possession there. So, like, I do think he has some ability to create off the dribble and do some of that creative inverted pick and roll stuff at the next level. But really, whatever role you put him in offensively, he's going to bring you value. And then defensively, I think, again, he's versatile. He can play multiple pick and roll coverages. I think that he's a guy you're comfortable switching. He guards well in space. He doesn't have the sort of like elite rim protection, the sort of elite athleticism to like really, really hold it down at the 5 for you. But I think if he's mostly playing the 4, some minutes at the 5, you're getting good value on both sides of the ball. And again, it's that versatility. I'm just very confident in him being a quality NBA player. And so that's the selling point to me with both those guys. It's just floor versatility that I really buy into. Okay, Logan, I'm going to ask you a specific question about 2 of the top prospects in this draft, because we talk about Filipowski being one of the most prominent college guys. 2 of the absolute most prominent college guys who just won a title together are very close on a lot of draft boards and very well may both be top 5 picks, that being Stephon Castle and Donovan Clingan from UConn. Which of those 2 do you prefer as a prospect?
I think it depends really on
Coward.
What you want. I'm going to say Castle because of positional value. I just think a guard with his skill set is just a little harder to find. And I don't mean that in any disrespect to Clingan. Clingan's a special rim protector, and I think Clingan's probably going to be better as a rookie. Like, I think he's just going to be more impactful in terms of how he can change the game completely defensively. So I think I like Clingan's floor a little more. I like Castle's ceiling a little more. And again, I think it's harder to find these do-it-all, really athletic guards than it is to find a good rim protector. Uh, and so that's why I would take Castle. I think his ceiling is way higher. Who am I more confident in being a winning and immediate impact guy? It's Clingan for sure, but I really, really like Castle's ceiling, man.
So I totally agree with everything you just said. There's no question Klingan has the higher floor. There's no question that Castle has the higher ceiling. So to some extent, I guess it comes down to how big do you think the gap in ceiling is and how confident are you in Castle reaching his ceiling? I'm going to lean him, even though I don't have like resounding answers to those questions. Like, I do worry about his shot, and I worry about him not really having an A plus trait offensively, although he's a really good athlete and he's quite a good passer. Like, I don't think that you're giving him A plus grades there. And then I worry about the shot. And if you struggle as a shooter, you struggle as a touch shot maker, like, you're not going to be a lead ball handler in this league. If he gets to be okay there, if he's average, then I think you're looking at a stud. Because even though most of the time when you look at a guard whose shot you're worried about, it's kind of like, hey, I'm probably going to stay away from that guy. He does so many other things because of his athleticism and his length defensively. He's just an insane competitor there because he's one of the best offensive rebounding and just an excellent overall rebounding guard. There is still a floor there. He's going to be able to impact the game without scoring, not like Clingan, because Clingan is going to be an elite rim protector. He's going to be an elite rebounder. He's a super efficient post scorer, really good finisher, coordinated, soft touch, and he's massive, and he's a good passer. This one's tough for me. This one is really, really tough. I honestly hadn't decided when I started answering this question, but I do feel like you kind of know what best case scenario for Clingan is, and it's just a good starter. And Castle can be more than that, but my confidence quotient in Clingan being a good starter is like crazy, crazy high. Like, this dude will not fail. I guarantee you he will be a good NBA player, and he will be a pretty damn good NBA player as a rookie. You think about what Walker Kessler could do. Imagine if that guy was bigger and just better offensively in every way, right? Even more physical, even more skilled, better passer. That's kind of what you're getting with Donovan Clingan. All right, speaking of high floors, Logan, if you were to put together a starting five of the highest floor guys in this class, because that's a theme that we've talked about, betting on floors with these dudes, maybe as opposed to ceilings in other classes, who'd be in that starting five for you?
I would start Castle. Actually, I think his floor with what he brings in the aggregate. You question his shot. I still would have him here, with his defensive ceiling, or excuse me, with his defensive floor, with his athletic floor. I think he does so many other great things. I think he's still going to be a really good player. I'd say Reed Shepherd with his shooting, I think just brings you.
Yeah.
He's going to be great. Like, I think he's going to be around for a long time. Like, I think that's just going to keep him around. And he does other great things, too. I think he's got legitimate point guard chops, handling out of the pick and roll. I think he's a good decision maker. I like his handle. I like a lot of what Reed Shepherd brings. Connect with his experience. Mm-hmm. I think that dude is just wired to get buckets. I think he's immediately going to come in and probably give a team 10 to 15 efficiently, maybe more. Good spot up player, good in the mid range, good everywhere. I just think this is a guy that you're going to be able to run actions for, and he's going to get buckets. Buzelis is also here for me at the 4 spot, and while I question his offensive game, I really wonder where Buzelis is going to get consistent offense from the perimeter. Like, I wonder about his shot. I wonder about his off the dribble game, but good cutter. He's a good shooter from the corners, too. I think Buzelis, at the bare minimum, is going to be a good corner shooter if you need him to be. If you just need him to go sit over there, I think he can do that. But what he does, playmaking, he's a good decision maker, can handle a little bit. It's really about what he brings defensively as a help side guy and a rim protector. Just positioning. I always trust Buzelis to be in the right spot at the right time. He's great in transition. So I like that about his game. And then I think Clingan has to be the pick here at the 5. Yeah. That guy, he might be the highest floor guy in this class. Clingan is, you said it well, man. I'm so confident that guy is just going to be great immediately. So I think he's a no-brainer there.
Yeah, it's Clingan or Shepherd for the highest floor, and De Silva. So those are a pretty easy 3 in my starting 5. In my backcourt, I'm going to go with a guy who we really haven't talked about. Maybe he doesn't literally have one of the 5 highest floors. I don't care. He's a super high floor guy, and I really like his game, and I think he probably does. And that's Tyler Kolek out of Marquette, another guy who was a great college basketball player, 23 years old, but like, this is just an incredibly mature offensive player. When you're thinking about what you want from either a awesome backup point guard or like a really solid starting point guard along a more dynamic scoring too, because you need to have a dynamic scoring guard in the league today, but like you can bring value just as being an awesome playmaker who is a solid scorer. Like, that's Kolek. And I do think that he's legit a good scorer as well. Like, he's quick, he's shifty, he's just incredibly crafty, has awesome touch as a finisher, and he's a really, really awesome shooter, up close to 40% from deep. But then as a passer, like, just very, very selfless, makes all the reads. So his limitations are kind of the same of any small guard who's not a great athlete, because this guy is small. He's 6'1" with a 6'3" wingspan. Defensively, although I think that he competes, that means he is going to be targeted. Offensively, that presents some issues in terms of finishing against NBA rim protection, but man, he tends to chisel his way to his spot and get up a pretty good look. I just am very confident in him being a good offensive player, and he's going to get attacked defensively, but he has the right mentality, and he's just a dog, dude, and a leader. Just a guy who I would want on my basketball team. My last spot here, I'm going to go with Devin Carter out of Providence, and he's not my favorite prospect overall, but the reason that he's so high on draft boards right now is unequivocally the floor. There's a theme with a lot of these guys. They tend to be older. Carter, 22 years old, and is just going to do a lot of things that help winning basketball. Offensively, he's versatile. There's really nothing that he can't do at least a decent level. This is a guy who will screen for you. This is a guy who will cut away from the ball. Pretty good shooter, physical driver, solid playmaker, and then defensively is really, really going to compete. The reason that I'm not as high on him as some is I do think that his ceiling is pretty darn low if you're talking about taking him top 10, but I think that floor is still really high. And I'll give an honorable mention here to Zach Edey, because I'm just pretty darn confident in his combination of overwhelming size and physicality and pretty good touch out of the post, and then his size and all those same traits as a roll man and the pure rim protection. Zach Edey's going to get 18 minutes a night in the NBA for quite some time. I'm pretty confident about that. Another guy, though, where the ceiling maybe isn't as high and the fit isn't intuitive in every spot, because a lot of teams aren't dying to add a lumbering 5 as like their starting guy and their only real option at the 5, because he's going to struggle to guard in space. But he's going to produce. He's going to produce in his minutes on the floor. I can tell you that much. All right, Logan. Last question, and then we're going to get into some very specific teams, how we think they should approach the draft, who we didn't touch on in our lottery mock. Who do you think is most likely to trade up into the top 5 in this class?
This draft is interesting because, there are so many. There's not a lot of high ceiling guys in this class as previous years. So I think you really have to, have full confidence in a guy if you're trading up to make the deal. The only team that really makes sense to me is Memphis moving up from 9, because they have such a major positional need at the 5 spot. And the one guy who I think is a concrete home run, like the guy's going to be great, is Donovan Clingan. And so I think it addresses probably their biggest need, which is at the 5 spot. And I think him and Jaren Jackson Jr. immediately would be a really potent interior, combination. So again, I think you have to be really confident that the guy you're getting is going to work, is going to fit, is going to be great. And Memphis has one of the biggest needs there at the 5 spot in the draft. And so, I think they have an asset that makes it intriguing, right? For a team later in the draft, if you were picking it in the late 20s, you'd have to attach a bunch of assets to move up. For Memphis, it's actually attainable because you give the team the 9th pick, you give them one player, bang, boom, both sides are happy, and they get their guy. So I would say Memphis trading up to get Clingan is probably the most likely outcome.
Yeah, it's very, very feasible, and it's been rumored that Memphis wants to do this. So I don't know exactly what that package would look like. Maybe it's the 9th pick and a future first. Maybe it is the 9th pick, and I don't think that they would want to trade a Vince Williams or anybody like that. They don't want to trade Marcus Smart, it's been reported, but even if it's another second on top of that future first, that's fine. To me, the gap in terms of security that you're getting between Donovan Clingan and whoever you'd be picking at 9, and crucially, the positional need, because I just don't think that Memphis can proceed with Triple J at the 5. I think that their defense falls off a cliff. I think that his inadequacies as a rebounder, what you lose when he's not allowed to roam as the 4, like Steven Adams was really important to this team's success. And I understand that you're limiting your ceiling offensively when you have a non-floor spacing 5, but I think that it offsets the value with what you're gaining defensively, because it's just crucial. Memphis kind of has to be a great team defense to really succeed, and I think that requires putting a 5 alongside Triple J. Clingan is the perfect kind of dude. So I would say it's probably Houston who you target at 3, because Houston really has no reason to sit there and pick trading with a division rival, but I think it's very possible, and I think it could end up being a real win-win. All right, Logan. So we mocked the full lottery on Wednesday, but I want to talk about some of the more specific teams who are contending, who are maybe big name franchises, whose plans we didn't get to touch on at all. We're going to work our way chronologically through after the lottery, starting with the Miami Heat at pick 15. Where would you like them to go?
And to be clear, too, for logical continuity purposes, I'm going to go based off of our lottery. The guys that are already gone are not going to be available here.
Oh, interesting. I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
But I don't play by the rules, so keep that in mind.
Miami, I think if Devin Carter is available at 15 would be a real good get. I just think I don't know, man, he seems like a Miami Heat kind of player, doing all the little things, being a good defender, rebounding, little stuff like that. And I think it's a big need for them, right? They've got Jaquez, they've got Jovic, they've got their young wings that they're going to bank on. So I think they should go out and get a guard. I think it's probably the biggest need for them. And, again, I think Carter's just a real winner, man. He seems like a real gritty kind of Miami Heat basketball player. The one thing that I'm concerned about is shooting right around Jimmy Butler. You want legitimate floor spacers, so maybe you would prefer a Jared McCain maybe here, but I really like Devin Carter and all of his winning traits, and he just seems like he would fit with Miami's culture, so I'm going with him at 15 to Miami.
Like it. I think that'd be great. I think that Carter is probably not going to be there. This guy might not be there either, but Tristan da Silva, to me, would be the dream. And by the way, this will not be the last time that I mention Tristan da Silva, because I think he's the dream for a lot of teams that are in the position where you're already proven as a playoff team. Who do you want? A pro-ready, big wing who can defend multiple positions, playmake, everything that I already talked about. I would just love that, and especially in Miami, because although they've added size, they are still quite small. I think that would be a really meaningful upgrade for them. And if Nikola Topic falls that far also, just to give an alternate, I think that having that sort of offensive injection would be really nice for them, because we know that that sort of lack of all-around skill is an issue. I would probably prioritize having a real quality forward, but they need more offensive skill. Topic could bring that. Maybe it conflicts with Hero and Rozier, but I just think that'd be a really good value pick. Plus, then you have Nikola Topic and Nikola Jovic, and that's sick. Okay, how about the Sixers, Logan? Just one pick after them at 16.
I would take Terrence Shannon Jr. here if I'm Philly. With Kelly Oubre potentially maybe getting priced out for Philadelphia, I think he'd be a good replacement. I like a lot of the things Shannon brings, playing with physicality, getting downhill, quickness, athleticism. And I like his shot. It's a little janky, but it's also just really hard to evaluate lefties shooting the basketball. Even as a left-hander myself, man, I just can't. It just looks a little
not aesthetic.
It just looks a little funky, man. Yeah, man, the way lefties shoot the ball. But I like Shannon's fit here. I think he brings some perimeter defense too. Again, you're looking for pieces that just fit, and Philadelphia's got a lot of question marks. I think they only have like 2 guys under contract for next season, Paul Reed and Embiid. But again, potentially G League MVP Paul Reed. Don't forget that. If Oubre leaves, I think Terrence Shannon Jr. would be a good replacement. I also am considering Jacoby Walter here, but I'm a little more confident in Terrence Shannon Jr. and what he brings elsewhere than Jacoby.
Yeah, I think most people would definitely say that this is a reach for Shannon, but also it's like you're fine taking a 24-year-old. He's basically 24 if you're Philly. You just want dudes who can impact winning now. But I had, again, written down Tristan da Silva as the dream, but I think that he probably goes before this. And then I had Jacoby Walter as the other guy. I just think that upgrading on the wings is going to be the priority for them. And maybe that's going out and getting a big star like Paul George, but I think it's just overall maintaining your versatility there. And Walter, I think you have some questions about his finishing around the rim. He wasn't great there. He's a guy who there have been questions about, like, how much of an on-ball creator is he, because there's been flashes of playmaking. He's definitely got some wiggle, but like not a super advanced shot creator. But I just don't think that matters all that much in Philly. I think you can just take whatever little bits of juice as a passer and creator off the bounce that you get from him. Mostly it's going to be about him knocking down his triples, and it's going to be about him defending. And he rebounds well for a guard. He moves pretty well laterally. He's got a 6'10 wingspan. He's a little bit slight, but I still think he would be overall a positive contributor, at least as much as you could expect from a guy of his age, basically 20, in that sort of 3-and-D role. I just like to see Philly go wing. I think that's definitely what makes the most sense. Okay, how about the Lakers, Logan? One pick behind them at number 17.
The Lakers pick is interesting here because last year, if you remember, they took Jalen Hood-Schifino over like Jaime Jaquez. They took him over
Cam
Brandon
Whitmore,
Podziemski.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm just talking about like immediate impact guys. So it really depends on what the front office wants to do. If they want to punt and like move on a different timeline, I would probably take a young guy. I don't think that makes sense. I think you take a winning asset that helps
They're not
LeBron
punting,
James
my
and
friend.
Anthony Davis right now. So I would probably take a guard. I would either take Devin Carter if he's here, or I would
Not
take
gonna be
Jared
there.
McCain. I don't think Devin Carter's going to be available. So I think I would take Jared McCain just in terms of shot making. He brings you another guard that can actually hit shots. You need that. With D'Lo's inconsistency, I'm not the highest on McCain just because of his like well-rounded impact, smaller guard, right? I worry about him defensively, but he brings me some poise, he brings me a little bit of playmaking, and he brings me shooting, which the Lakers desperately, desperately need in that backcourt, and they need help there. So I'm not the biggest fan of McCain's game, but I think he works here in LA.
That's interesting. I think it is a good choice because I do think that McCain at least competes defensively, and that's what you ideally would like. You want a guard who can bring you the combination of some defensive grit and some offensive skill, so it's not either Reeves and D'Lo, two very offensively oriented guards, or one and then Vando or Cam Reddish, right, athletes who defend but have real offensive limitations. Gabe Vincent was sort of supposed to be the best balance of the two. McCain would be a good pick in that sense. I also think, though, the other spot that you're looking at is adding a second quality big, so you don't ever have to worry about Jackson Hayes minutes. That's sort of where I'm leaning. I've seen a lot of people talking about Edey to the Lakers, and I can actually really see that. Now, I would not want to see AD and Edey out on the floor together much because I think that LA's offense thrived last year because of how much skill they had out there, because of the fact that they really embraced 5 out, and it made them one of the best offenses in the league down the stretch. But when it comes to the non-AD minutes, like, he's going to be a problem for teams to guard. He's especially going to be a problem for second units to guard, and he's going to maintain at least that rim protection and that rebounding on the inside. The other alternative to have a guy who is more palatable playing alongside AD would be Kel Ware, because you're bringing floor spacing, you're bringing a bit mobility and athleticism compared to Edey. And I will say one last time, Tristan da Silva would be sick here.
Dude, I love the Edey pick, actually. Think about this, too. I know you're not talking about them playing together. In a hypothetical matchup in the playoffs against Denver or Minnesota, you can actually match their size with AD and Edey and LeBron. And again, it's not going to be pretty, but you match them physically. And then I'm not saying you have a Jokic stopper. You at least finally have someone that is physically big enough to match up with Jokic. So I think they need a guard desperately off the bench, but I actually think I like Edey more, and he is going to feast on second units, like you mentioned. I'm gonna flip my pick. I actually love Edey to the Lakers. I think that would be a dream fit.
You make a great point about at least the option to go with the two big looks, which like can be legitimately pivotal. I think that we've seen them attempt to use the roamer strategy with AD when you're talking about the Hotch being asked to stay in front of Jokic. If it was Zach Edey, we're talking about 7'4", 300 pounds. That's a completely different dynamic. And then if you're not doing that look, as you wouldn't in most matchups, then you just play him a quality 15 minutes a game off the bench, and like he's going to be super productive in those minutes. I think it's good value for Edey. Again, the fit is probably clunky enough with a lot of these lottery teams that they won't want to take him. This is a spot where I do think the fit makes sense, and he's a very high floor player for a team that is trying to win now. Okay, how about New Orleans at pick 21?
I think New Orleans should take a 5.
Yep.
You saw in the playoffs, Valanciunas sometimes couldn't get burned. You're running Larry Nance 5 minutes, so I'm not saying this is going to put Valanciunas out of a job or anything, but you at least give.
No, I think Valanciunas is out of a job in New Orleans.
Well, I'm saying if it gives you another option, right? If you want to bring him back, you can. You have a second unit guy. If not, you let him walk.
Larry Nance better.
Sadly, I think Missy is probably the guy. Maybe Filipowski. I say maybe Filipowski because you get a little bit of that floor spacing alongside Zion where, if you give him the rock, like that's just a weapon, man, having a guy that can hit from out there. You saw it, right? And lineups with Larry Nance. Like Nance can stretch the floor. So I would take Missy if you want the rim protection. I would say take Missy if you want the shooting and the skill. And one thing you didn't mention with Filipowski, dude, some of the post fades that he shoots, like Filipowski really looks like a guard. Like he has got guard skill. Man. And I mean, it just really, like his fadeaway is beautiful. Like it looks, it's a work of art. It's like, it's so pretty, it's disgusting. I would say Missy or Filipowski. I definitely think they need a 5 at this, at pick 21.
Unequivocally, they need a 5. And even though I said Larry Nance better, I think he was legitimately better than Valanciunas, at least for a lot of stretches of that series against OKC. It's also like Larry Nance can't be your 5. He's too small. You can't do that. That's untenable going forward. So I think that Missy is my favorite here as well. This is Yves Missy out of Baylor, for those who don't know. Filipowski I really do like. And it's difficult because, like, you don't want a 5 who is limited offensively, but to me, it's more important that you get a guy who can really, really anchor that defense and then who can also bring you like some real vertical spacing. And I think that Missy's a guy who can guard on the perimeter relatively well too, which is really big, maintaining that switchability, because like the best version of the Pelicans to me is Zion, a lead guard, and then 2 awesome defensively oriented wings who can knock down shots, which they already have with Herb and Trey, and then like an athletic defensive vertical spacing big. I think that that's Missy, and so that to me would be the best pick. Also, though, if Edey is still on the board and if Missy's off, then I would definitely consider him. I just think it's kind of got to be 5 or bust for New Orleans. Okay, how about the Bucks at pick 23, Logan?
I've got 2 guys highlighted. The first is Kevin McCullough out of Kansas. I think McCullough is going to be a really good defender immediately. I've got questions about his offensive game, but he's got flashes there of playmaking, of shooting, of scoring. It's a little raw, but he's a really good defender, and the Bucks desperately need perimeter defense. So I think McCullough is the better defender of these 2 guys, who's a little bit more limited offensively. If you want the more offensively inclined guy with a little bit more questions defensively, I would take Jacoby Walter, but I think a defensive-oriented wing is probably where the Bucks need to go. And I think I'm leaning McCullough just because I think McCullough's the better defender.
So I think that definitely a versatile, defensively oriented wing would be a very good pickup, but also somebody who brings you some offensive punch. So we're not talking about like an Andre Jackson Jr. level of offense. McCullough, I think this would probably be a reach. I'm going to shout out my boy Jalen Tyson here. I think that, again, you're getting a dude who's going to defend well then, but is going to rebound even better than his size would indicate, and is going to bring you just a lot of offensive versatility. I could see the alternate route of we want a younger, more athletic 5 who doesn't limit us defensively like Brook Lopez, just in terms of his inability to guard in space. And that's where, if Missy was still on the board, he'd be interesting. I would say Kel'el Ware, because then you also get the floor spacing, but I really think there's no chance that Kel'el Ware falls all the way to 23. So my favorite route would probably be get a quality wing. Jalen Tyson to me is probably the best guy, the guy who I'm most comfortable picking, who will still be available in this range. Okay, how about the Knicks, Logan, who pick back-to-back at 24 and 25?
The Knicks don't have a ton of needs to me, man. So I'm conflicted. Do you just go with a couple of young guys, maybe projects? Like, do you just go with some scorers? I think Kaishawn George could work here in New York. A guy with a little bit of a scoring punch. I also like the overseas guy, Nikola Jokic. I've also heard he's second round, so maybe you're reaching a little bit here. George, I like. I think you go for a little bit of more some scoring or playmaking punch. And maybe Reeves. Again, I think Antonio Reeves may be a little bit of a reach here. He's consensus second round, but I like what he can do off ball, and I think he could complement a Deuce McBride off the bench. I think he could complement Jalen Brunson within the flow of the offense. And then identity-wise, he's limited offensively, but I think he works with a defensive culture. I think Kevin McCullough could work here, just in terms of what he brings defensively with what the Knicks want to do. So the Knicks are a big question mark, man. I don't know what you do because the majority of their roster's filled out. OG Anunoby is a free agent. I think the Knicks desperately need to bring him back, but the Knicks don't really scream like they have a bunch of needs to me. So they're two very intriguing picks at the late first round.
Yeah, they are. Obviously, this is a really good basketball team, and part of what makes them so great is their depth. So there's a couple of archetypes that I'm kind of looking at. I think adding a bigger wing would be good for them, because even though all of these dudes who play for New York play bigger than their size, especially Josh Hart, right? The fact that you can throw out a 6'4", 6'5" guy as your 3 and he's going to be an awesome rebounder, that's a special weapon. And also I think that some of their size stuff felt different in the playoffs because they didn't have Julius Randle and then they didn't have Mitchell Robinson. But I just think generally that's an archetype that's pretty valuable for any team, and it makes you less dependent on playing Deuce and Dante, all these guys, just a lot of guards, big minutes. So I'll shout out Jalen Tyson again, because he is bigger and he brings that two-way value and that versatility. I also think they are in a position where, they do have so many quality basketball players. Maybe you take a flyer on, Ryan Dunn, who is just an insane defender, arguably the best defensive player in this class out of UVA, Logan, as you know. And then you're getting size, you're getting length, you're getting everything from this dude. Elite perimeter defense, insane secondary rim protection for a wing. I just really, really worry about his offense. This dude is a terrible three-point shooter, a terrible free throw shooter. We're talking about a you don't guard him kind of guy. So this is probably too high. I probably wouldn't take him in the first round because of that, because I'm not really optimistic about him improving there. But if there's a spot for him, New York could make sense. I'm going to say I prefer Jalen Tyson, even though I also like him for the Bucks. Whatever. Nobody's actually picking these guys yet. And then the pick that I really like for them, because they do have these two back-to-back, is Filipowski. Because if Hartenstein walks, which he very likely may, just because you can't pay everybody, and I think that guy's going to get a bag. To me, Filipowski allows you to maintain size at the 5, which is really important, having both him and Mitchell Robinson you can play, and versatility as well, because again, I don't think that Filipowski is necessarily best at a 5. I'd like to see him as a 4, but I think that he can play the 5, and then you're getting a more offensively oriented look with him out there. They're going to have to fill that gap in one way or another, and I think some of the more conventional straight-up athletic 5s who we've been talking about, Kel'el Ware, Missy, will probably be off the board by this point. And I really, really like Filipowski's game offensively. I think that'd be a good pickup for them. I think he's very ready to contribute now as well. Okay, how about the Nuggets at pick 28, Logan?
The Nuggets to me have two clear needs that they should address, and that's bench point guard and then bench center. I'm stuck between a few prospects. I like your boy Kolek here to Denver. I like UConn's Cam Spencer a little bit. I also like Filipowski here too, like in non-Jokic minutes and how skilled he is. I think I prefer point guard. I think I'm gonna go with your boy Kolek here, man. I just think he brings a really high floor. He's probably a little more consistent. I'm just wondering, like, do you think he can be better than like a Reggie Jackson immediately?
Yeah, I think so. He's much steadier. You trust the process much more. That's one of the most frustrating things about Reggie, just taking bad shots. I think Kolek's a much smarter, much more complete, consistent
Right.
offensive player.
Because I think he's more. I think he may be more skilled, more athletic, right? But it's like, would I rather have that or a steadying presence? The Denver Nuggets have not really had anything steady about their bench over the last couple years,
Yeah.
and so those are the two primary positions. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with your boy Kolek here.
It's a good pick. I like it a lot. I don't know if Kolek will still be on the board, but I don't think it's totally out of the question. It seems that it's very likely that the Nuggets take Deron Holmes here, and that is filling in the other archetype that you mentioned that to me is probably even more important, just like having any five who you trust to play in non-Jokic minutes, and Deron Holmes is a good athlete. He had a legitimately awesome three-point shooting season this past year, and there's some questions about how sustainable that is because he wasn't a great free throw shooter and he hadn't really shown that floor spacing before this year, but I'm pretty confident in it, and this is a guy who can like attack mismatches out of the post, even has some ball handling, playmaking chops, and then is a really good shot blocker. So he's a bit undersized for a five, but like if he's your backup five, I think you're getting a lot of good stuff out of him that Denver has desperately needed because the non-Jokic minutes have been a disaster for a long time, and that is largely about the offensive side of the ball, not having anybody who can come close to replicating his value. It's also largely about the defensive ineptitude of a lot of the options that they've trotted out there. I think that Holmes would be an improvement. Okay, and finally, Logan, the Celtics at pick 30. Who's your favorite choice for them?
I'm gonna shout the guy you just did. I think they should go with a big man. I would either take Deron Holmes or Kyle Filipowski if he's still available. The main reason is just depth concerns, right? I like Luke Cornett as much as the next guy, but is the guy playable in playoff settings? Not many. He can eat against the Cavs in stretches, sure, but Al Horford's getting older. Xavier Tillman's a little undersized, a little limited, right? I think Filipowski brings a little more skill, and then Holmes brings, again, a little undersized, but he's athletic, has some skill to him as well. It's really just that he's undersized, but he's pretty versatile. I just think you need depth there, man. You don't know if the fall off is coming for Horford. I hope it doesn't. Porzingis with his injury concerns. I just think there's a lot of questions there with the big man spot, and I think they should address it here by getting a young guy.
Totally agreed. I would take Filipowski if he were still here, but I think that big man is the position to address because obviously there's not much that Boston needs, but if there is anything, it's a legit third big, especially one who could play both the 4 and the 5. So if it's okay, we want to go Filipowski and Horford, look, great, that's viable. We want to go Filipowski and KP, great, that's viable. We're down one of them, probably KP. Okay, this guy can be our backup 5. I think that's the best option, and I think he's also just a good basketball player who, if he were to last until 30, would be, in my opinion, undervalued and pro-ready for a team who's really only interested, I would think, in pro-ready guys.